Greetings to you, brethren. In light of the coronavirus, what are your thoughts? I know many persons are gripped with fear right now. Many are anxious as to what is happening worldwide. I mean, the virus is spreading like wildfire. But in light of that, I want to ask a question. Because this is the topic I want to address. Are we living in the last days? And if we are living in the last days, what are the evidence? What are the proof that we are actually living in the last days? There are many thoughts on this topic. Can Christ return tonight? What about next year? What about the other year? Okay. But are we living in the last days? All right. We are on the same page. But the question still remains, how long do we have to wait for the return of Christ? I was speaking to a brethren a couple months ago, and I consider that person to be very conservative. Someone who is in the church for quite a while. And we were discussing the time frame, and I asked, and I'm quite certain that many of us kind of thought with that idea as to how long from now will Christ return. And I asked the question, and he says, to my surprise, I wasn't expecting an answer like that. He says, he's looking at another 15 years. Of course, my thought was between 30 to 40 years. But I was surprised when he told me, what are your thoughts? How long do we have to wait for the return of Christ? These are current questions within the church of God, and certainly outside of the church of God. These are the questions. Are we living in the last days? No. Some person will say, well, we have a few hundred years. And many predict, which is where I fall, 20 to 25 years. And yet, on the outside, some claim that Christ could return tomorrow, tonight, next week, anytime. Of course, he will come like a thief in the night. What are your thoughts? Are the waning years of the 20th century the last days? Does our former teaching under the Worldwide Church of God, Herbert W. Armstrong, still apply? And I'm going to deal with some of the arguments that are out there. Does the breakup of the church that subsequently lack power in preaching the gospel around the world mean that the end is far off? Because of course the gospel must go out before the return of Christ. And of course we don't have the power now. We lost the power when the church broke up. So therefore some argue that that will set back the time far back. And so Christ is waiting on us to get out the gospel, to come together, to find a way to proclaim the gospel in the most powerful way. That is one of the arguments out there. Did we read the fig tree wrong? Did we have some false interpretation into the signs of the time? Many will say that. Even the publications of the churches within the churches of God kind of edge around that topic. Some, of course. Subject of the return of Christ. But Peter and Jude warns us that this would happen. Just when all the factors would be in place, they wrote, scoffers, mockers, cynics, skeptics, reasonable people would try to convince God's people that he would not return. Scoffers, the skeptics. And Peter addressed these very issues. The other argument that is out there, many look upon the world scene and calculate Europe needs a whole decade or more before it can challenge the US. And of course, we believe that Europe will be the dominant force in the world. And we believe that the US will decline. But that seems far off. When we look at what is happening now, that seems far off. Can we honestly say Europe has that power to challenge the US right now? And these are the questions that is being asked. Peace in the Middle East, they say, looks feasible for the first time since Israel was founded. 2 million man army of the East is not even on the horizon. And I could challenge that. I could challenge that because if you look at the population of China right now, with the vast army that they have, we can claim that that is possible today. And then some judge the condition of the church. Christ cannot come back now. We haven't gone to the entire world as a witness yet. So how can Christ come back? The church still has a big work to do. We must reunite before Christ can return. So all of these statements have one thing in common. All of these, what I have just mentioned, have one thing in common. Assumption. That event will progress as they always have. Things will remain as it is. We just have to look at what happened recently. The world was struck suddenly. Everything changes immediately. In regards to the coronavirus. And some say the World Health Organization has done us a disservice because they remain silent. They knew this from before, and now it is out of control. Of course, we know that they were trying to protect the world's economy. And so we could claim that the real figure is suppressed. Why? Because everybody, just last night, I was looking at a statement that the President of the United States make. And he says that the media is blowing this out of proportion. But the real concern, brethren, is the economy. Everybody wants to protect their economy. But this is a threat to the world economy right now. Just a short period of time, in less than 2 months, the place is turning upside down. People are gripped with fear as to what will happen. So Peter, however, warned us of such reasoning. World event will seem to be occurring normally, but when God's time comes, terrible and sudden destruction shall come upon them. Sudden. Just one event can change things. Everything looks normal. And they cry, peace, peace, when sudden destruction shall come upon them. So we cannot take for granted when things seem peaceful and calm and the economy is booming and everybody claims that everything is well. But we as God's children must be ready at all time. Whether or not Christ will remain for the next 100 years. We must be ready at all time. Why? Because even if Christ delayed for the next 100 years, Christ can come for any one of us right now. Sound like I'm contradicting myself. Because we don't guarantee how long we will live. Any number of things, brethren, can claim our lives. And it is not just the elderly, young people as well, middle age. Your life is uncertain right now. So we must be ready at all time, regardless of how many years are left. We must be ready. We must be alert. Alert as if Christ could come now. We must be ready at all time. What are the last days? Most of us know that term, the last days, means. We know what it means. But for clarity's sake, let's give this a quick review. The Bible uses it for the first time in Genesis 49, verse 1. When Jacob calls his son and says, "Gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days." Jacob then proceeds to prophesy about the national traits of the tribe of Israel before the return of the Messiah. We also find the same Hebrew word in the well-known verse of Isaiah 2 and Micah, which are my two favorite texts. You read Isaiah 2 and Micah 2, it looks as if both of them copy, or one of them copy the other. Almost the same phrase. "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountain." The prophets then describe what will occur when God's kingdom is established on the earth. In the New Testament, Jesus and the apostle use the corresponding Greek term 16 times. And it is translated last day, last day, the last days, the last time, last hour. John alone uses it 8 times, most often referring to the resurrection. In John 12, verse 48, Jesus used the last days to denote the great white throne judgment. From just this short review, we can see that the last days is synonymous term for the last days of the Lord. The Lord, the day of the Lord. That phrase is founded throughout the Old and the New Testament. So it depends on the context. It can mean a specific day, the very day when Christ will return. It can mean the time of God's wrath. It can also mean the Christian era in terms of from the first advent of Christ coming down through our time. And therefore we can safely claim that the last days begun right up there, because Peter mentioned it. Peter mentioned in Acts 2, I believe, quoting from Joel, Peter said, "These are the last days." So we can safely claim that we are in the last days. Are we in the last days? Yes, we are. But when someone speaks of the last days, he most frequently means the general period before the return of Jesus Christ. And then, this is one of the popular texts that is frequently cited. Matthew 24 and 22 as a sign that we are living in the last days. And Christ said, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. The phrase, no flesh would be saved. In other translation, not a soul, that's more fat, not a soul would be saved alive. The Four Gospel by E.V. Rue, no living thing would have escaped. Amplified Bible, no human being would endure and survive. We have the Revived English Bible, no living thing could survive. And then we have the New Testament by Kenneth Wuest. All flesh would not be saved from destruction. All flesh, all flesh, not some, all flesh. So we can infer a concrete meaning from this verse. The last days will be marked by mankind's ability to destroy himself. Mankind's ability to destroy himself. To destroy every living thing from the face, from the planet. And if God does not step in, if he does not intervene in the world affair, the nation will fight until all life is destroyed. So my question to you, brethren, is that possible today as we speak? Is that possible today as we speak? The US and the Soviet Union just fought a 45 years old Cold War, during which both of them stockpiled enough, listen to this, enough nuclear weapon to erase life 50 times, to erase life on the earth 50 times. enough nuclear that is stockpiled right now can destroy life from the face of the earth. Not one time, not two times, not 50 times. Destroy it one time, come up 2 times, 50 times. That's what you call overkill. And even though the nation reduced nuclear stockpile in recent years, just in recent years, the current overkill factor is still more than enough to kill all flesh on the earth. You tell me that we are not living in the last days? Statistics from 1995 show that 40,640 nuclear weapons are still available in the 5 major nuclear power: the US, Russia, Britain, France, China, and several other nations are known to have been developing nuclear weapons right now. Right now, Iran is on the verge of starting back their program. Not to mention Kim, Korea. Who is on the verge of developing his own nuclear power. And you say we are not in the last days? India, Pakistan, North Korea, South Africa, Iran, Ukraine, and others. All of these countries, to protect themselves, are developing nuclear weapons. At no other time in history, man have the ability to destroy all life form from the planet. Today, brethren, as I speak, the nuclear weapons at their disposal is not the only thing that is threatening, because most of these countries have what you call chemical weapon, biological weapon. And we don't know how many secret weapons that the media does not get a hold of. There's a view out there that the coronavirus was manufactured in the lab. And it just got out. And we see the havoc that it is creating. And it also has domino effect, because enough people are dead. Once the threat prevails, then we know the economy is under threat. Right now, my place is struggling to get raw material. And they say it's because of the virus that delayed the raw material, causing people to have to stay home. So we see that it is having its effect right now as we speak. So just imagine if this continues for the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And we're not creating any fear, but these are the reality. that we must face. This is to say to us that we must not take things for granted. This is to say to us that yes, you have your job and things is going well for you, everything is going okay for you, but just in a short span of time, everything can turn upside down and disrupt your life. Are you prepared for that, brethren? That's the question I'm asking. Yes, we can argue as to whether Christ will delay his coming for the next 20, 30, 40 years. But the question, the easiest thing, for us, is to die. It's easy. That's the easiest thing. But can we honestly say, when you think of it, we are prepared to deal with the suffering? Person who come down with cancer, some would argue that it is better for them to die than go through the pain, the suffering. And that is what we are likely to go through if the world turns upside down. It will affect your life, your ability, our ability to live comfortable. Those of us who love comfort, I love comfort. Your ability to be comfortable. Think about it, brethren. Think about it honestly. How long do the last days last? So man has been able to commit genocide for 15 years or so. He has not pushed the button yet. But the question is, why you think he won't push the button at some point in time? Why you think that he won't push the button? Could we go on long? Could we go for a long period of time, maybe centuries, before man attempts to destroy himself? We know that history revealed to us that no weapon that has ever developed was never used. We know for certain that it is likely that they will use this. You see, Jesus in Luke 21, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all things are fulfilled. How long must we wait? This generation will by no means pass away. But which generation? I'm going to break it down. Which generation? Certainly, Jesus was not speaking about his generation. He said, this generation, I heard somebody was speaking on the topic, and said Jesus was talking about his generation. But which generation? This generation will not pass. But which generation? It could not have been the generation of the apostles. Because all these things were not fulfilled in their time. Yes, while we argue that the last days began in the apostles' time, and they too believed that Christ would have come back in their time. So by putting verse 31 and 32 together, we can conclude with generation that sees these things. The generation that recognized the signs of the Olivet prophecy being fulfilled is the generation. Now, follow me. Since 1952, man has been able to eradicate all life form from this planet. Since 1952. What generation discovered, invented, and tested the use of these weapons? Can correct me if you don't agree with me. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or Nagasaki, the technology to erase human life from the earth. What generation heard the heavenly prophetic message from Mr. Armstrong? What generation? This generation. I remember as a young man, used to get up, Sunday morning? Every Sunday morning, that's about 3 o'clock. Was excited about the world tomorrow with Herbert W. Armstrong. Blanket the world. Meeting, going all around, meeting kings and prime minister, telling them about the coming kingdom of God. This generation so Armstrong, his explanation of Matthew 24, what generation most or did support his work during the A-Day. We still have people. So if this is correct, if this is a correct reasoning, this is the argument I'm putting forward. If my reasoning is correct, Christ described the generation that fought World War II and carried on into the Cold War. And some of those people are still alive. You see, let me get certain things out of the way. I am not setting dates. I am not attempting to set any dates. That's not my... But what I can say to you, if I may use an analogy, I have a mango tree, a Julie mango tree at the front of my yard. But it kind of overgrown, get crowded, and it look awful. And then it create this kind of dark area at the side of the building. So I'm saying that that is not good for security purpose, because sometimes me and my wife come in late in the night. So we need to make sure that the place is properly lit. So I said to myself, I'm going to cut cut it down, but I'm going to trim it up because it looked just crowded, it just overgrown. We didn't plant it with a view that it would grow out. Okay, you know, some jewelry tree kind of close. But the day before I decided to cut the tree, I noticed some little bud, and I realized that the mango tree started to blossom. And I said, I can't cut this mango tree again because it started blossom. And when you go there, you know, it's like a flower tree, just blossom just spread all over the place. So my point is that this tree is now blossoming. And I know definitely within another few months, not a year, I will certainly be able to go and pick a mango from my jewelry tree.
Not worried about security.
No.
Not worried about security.
But the argument, though, is that even though I'm looking forward to picking the first mango, she would not want me to cut that tree. No. But even though I'm looking forward to the first mango, I cannot tell you which day I'm going to pick the first mango. Yes. I cannot tell you that I'm going to pick a mango the 27th of April, May, or whatever. I cannot choose a specific day. But I know, based on the fact that the tree will blossom, I know that, and even some little mango is there, I know that I'm going to pick a mango. And so it is with the same thing with the return of Christ. We cannot predict which day, which year, which month Christ will return. But we know that it's mango season now.
Yeah, man.
We know that it's mango season now. We know that the return of Christ, based on what is happening around the world. And yes, we argue that the last day began during the apostles' time. Just let's look at Hebrews 1. Long ago at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophet. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. So the writer to the Hebrew is now claiming that the last days began right then and there. Are we in the last days? We are. Peter, on the day of Pentecost, quoted Job. Not Job. Jude. Joel, quoted Joel. And in the last days it shall be, God declares that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see vision, and your old men shall dream dreams. We know that everything is not fulfilled here, but certainly it began at Pentecost when the Holy Spirit was poured out. So Peter here is agreeing with us that the last days, and we could go into many other texts, has begun. But things step up. Which generation witnessed the escalation of religious fervor, war, disease, hunger, natural disaster, and recognized that the prophecies were being fulfilled? Which generation recognized all of these over a period of time? You know, the former Church of God, the Worldwide Church of God, in the 1950s and 60s, more than any other group, they fit the parameter of this prophecy. More than any other single group who proclaim almost every household could boast a magazine. I remember my landlord, that's when I was introduced to the church. My landlord, he used to work with somebody who used to attend the Worldwide Church. And he came around and he said, "Boy, I noticed you love this program." And he bring a whole host of books and magazines to me. And then I started to read. Because I used to watch the program every Sunday afternoon. The World Tomorrow. All around the world, people are familiar with this gospel. But for that day and hour no man knows. That's Matthew 24. We know that generally, however, that these are the last days because of religious deception all over the world. We know that everything will lead up to famine and pestilence, earthquakes, strange weather. We see the weather pattern. We already see the weather pattern. We already witness, not necessarily in Jamaica, but some natural disaster that takes place. And all these are the beginning of sorrows. Verse 8. This must come first before the great tribulation and martyrdom, where the saints will be persecuted. Another signs of the end, Matthew 24 offer another signs of the end time. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world before the end come. Now, there is an argument out there that says that while Mr. Armstrong did proclaim the gospel, everybody did not hear the gospel. But I want to debunk that argument. he technically did not witness before every nation. And the literature technically did not reach every single person. But in the context of Matthew 24, however, the timing of this great work of preaching the gospel is wrong if it is applied strictly to Mr. Armstrong. In the paragraph running between verses 4 and 14, this statement appears at the end of the context after the opening of the fifth seal. That's talking about Revelation. Verse 9. See Revelation 6 to 11. So verse 14 seems to indicate a ministry active during the Great Tribulation. There is going to be a specific ministry that would be active during the Great Tribulation. So if the argument is that this gospel of the kingdom did not reach the world, if the argument is that the church lost its power, if the argument is that the church is fractured, so we are not able to get the gospel out, if the argument is that we are waiting until the church comes together to proclaim the gospel, then I am afraid that we're fighting a losing battle.